All right, let's jump right in. If you're a foreign investor with U.S. rental property, you are in the right place. We're not just going to cover the basics of the ITIN today. No, we're diving deep into one critical choice, a choice that could literally save you thousands in taxes. So let's get to it.
So here's the situation, right? You're a foreign investor, you've got rental income coming in from the US, but you don't have a social security number. The real question isn't just, how do I stay legal? It's, how do I do this smartly? How do I make sure I'm not paying a penny more in tax than I absolutely have to? That's the puzzle we're gonna solve. And that question really gets to the heart of the matter, what I call the investor's tax dilemma. Because look, it doesn't matter what your immigration status is or where you live. If you own property in the United States and you're renting it out, the IRS sees that as U.S. source income. And, well, they expect to hear from you.
Okay, so let's be super clear about this. The law is not flexible here. Any income that comes from the US, like your rental checks, has to be reported, period. Not having an SSN isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It just means you need a different key to unlock the system. And just ignoring it? That's not really an option, unless you're a fan of some pretty hefty financial penalties. This whole legal setup is exactly why a very specific tool was invented.
And that tool, that key I just mentioned, that's the ITIN. Seriously, think of it just like that. It's the key that lets you open the door to filing your taxes correctly with the IRS when you don't have a social security number. It's step one, the absolute essential first step to getting on the right side of US tax law. So what is this thing really? An individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN for short, is a number the IRS gives out for one and only one reason, for federal tax processing. That's its entire job. It's just a unique code so they can track individuals who have to file US taxes but can't get an SSN. And you know, this isn't some brand new thing. The ITIN program has actually been around since 1996. It was created to solve a very specific problem, giving foreign nationals a straightforward way to report their US income. It's a tool for tax administration, pure and simple. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, now this is where we need to pay close attention, because this cuts through so much confusion. Let's be crystal clear. An ITIN is not an SSN. They are not the same thing. Look at the purpose. An ITIN is for tax reporting only. It does not give you the right to work, it does not get you social security benefits, and it does not change your immigration status one bit. The easiest way to tell them apart, an ITIN is 9 digits, just like an SSN, but it always starts with the number 9.
All right, so you've gone through the process, you have your ITIN, great. But here's the thing, just having the number isn't the whole story, not even close. The real power, the real strategy, comes from how you use it. And that brings us to the absolute core of this whole discussion. So I'm gonna ask you point blank, which path are you going to choose for your rental income? Because yes, you have a choice. And trust me on this, the financial difference between these two paths is, well, it's massive. This isn't some tiny detail on the tax code. This is a fundamental decision that will completely shape your tax bill. And here they are, side by side. You've got two paths. Path A is the default. It's what happens if you do nothing. Your rental income gets hit with a flat 30% withholding tax. And that's on your gross revenue. Every single dollar that comes in. No deductions. Ouch. But now look over at Path B, the strategic election. This is a game changer. Here, you're taxed on your net income. You know, after you subtract all your legitimate expenses. We're talking mortgage interest, property taxes, repairs, even depreciation. And the tax rate? It's not that flat 30% anymore. It's the standard, often much lower US income tax rates. So the question is simple. Do you want to be taxed on everything you collect, or just on your actual profit? So, how do you get on that sweet Path B? Well, you have to make a formal choice. It's often called the net election. It's a specific rule in the tax code that basically lets you raise your hand and tell the IRS hey, I want you to treat my rental income like a U.S. business. And that simple declaration is the legal key that unlocks all those juicy deductions and lets you pay tax on your profit, not your gross revenue. And here's the how-to. It is a formal process, you have to do it right, but it's actually pretty straightforward. First, you draft a statement saying you're making this choice. Then, you list out the details about your properties. And here's the most important part. You have to attach that statement to your tax return. Once you've done that, you're in. You report your income and your expenses on Schedule E, just like any US-based investor would. Okay, so mastering the tax code is huge. But what's fascinating is that this little 9-digit number, it started to take on a life of its own in ways the IRS probably never even imagined. So the big question is, can an ITIN actually be your ticket into the broader US financial system? And this isn't just some hypothetical idea. Listen to this quote from a bank chairman. He talks about his bank going from making its first ITIN mortgage loan to becoming an aggregator for them, which basically means they're buying up and bundling ITIN loans from other banks. That tells you there's a real growing market here. But we've got to keep our feet on the ground here. We have to be realistic. While some doors are definitely opening, the whole market is still in its early days. So yes, you can open a bank account with an ITN at more and more places, but when you start talking about big stuff like mortgages, well, that's still a pretty niche market. A big part of the problem is the lack of a secondary market. Banks can't easily sell these loans off, which makes them nervous. So if you do find a lender, you should definitely expect a much longer, more intense approval process. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the real-world risks and, let's be honest, the bureaucratic headaches of the ITIN program itself, because it's definitely not all smooth sailing. So it all begins with this form right here, the W-7. And let me tell you, the IRS is incredibly strict about it. You almost always have to submit this application with a valid federal tax return, unless you meet a very specific exception. The paperwork they require to prove who you are and your foreign status is no joke, and even one tiny mistake can get the whole thing thrown out. So, how strict are we talking? Well, get this. In 2023 alone, just 1 year, the IRS rejected over 250,000 I-10 applications. Let that number sink in. That tells you everything you need to know. This is not a rubber stamp process. The pressure to get your application perfect the first time is really, really high. Okay, so let's quickly run through the key risks you need to think about. First, as we just saw, is a flat-out application rejection. It happens a lot. Second is a very real, very practical fear. You often have to mail in your original critical documents like your passport. And there's always a chance they could get lost in the shuffle. And finally, data privacy. Now, for the most part, federal law protects your tax info. But, and this is a big but, there are exceptions. A new agreement for 2025 will allow the IRS to share your address with ICE, but only for non-tax criminal investigations, and only for people who already have a final order of removal. It's a very specific, narrow exception, but it's something you absolutely need to know exists. So we'll end where we started, with a question for you. For any investor, the ITIN is a must-have tool just for compliance. But its real value, its real power, is in the strategy. That choice, the choice to be taxed on your net profit instead of your gross income, that decision is entirely in your hands. So the real question is, are you using your ITIN to its full potential? Are you making the most strategic choice for your investments?